I actually met my best friend when we were 11 years old. And, we went to separate schools, so we didn't really see each other at all until right before our freshman year of high school. We were both in the band, and we both happened to play the same instrument. And since then, we've been essentially inseparable.
I met my best friend Christina on the bus in first grade on our way to the first day of school.
I met my closest friends at school, so high school and college.
I actually do not have anyone that I consider as a best friend. There are several individuals in my life. I met most during my undergrad career. Others I met through my local church community.
It was in 6th grade and I had just transferred schools. We wound up kind of having mutual friends, and over the next 2 years we sort of just realized that we were very similar.
Hello, and welcome to You, Me, and Ennui, the show where you, the listener, and me, your host, Mary Kate Polanin, discuss the challenges that come with life's uncertainty. And that's the ennui. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of You, Me, and Ennui. My name is Mary Kate Polanin, and I'm so excited to be bringing you another episode from our season. If you've been listening along, we've been talking about relationships, and I'm really excited about this one because it's talking about relationships in a really relatable way, and that's that constant, or not constant, but maybe very relatable problem of, or tension with trying to find friends as an adult. So I'm really excited to have our guest, Anita Michaud. She is the founder of Dinner with Friends, and their mission is all around how to make friends. Once you're outside of that college setting, what do you do? So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest. Anita Michaud is a conversation curator, a passionate amateur chef, and the founder of Dinner with Friends. Growing up in the restaurant industry, she developed a passion for food and the connections it creates. After moving to NYC, she quickly realized how tough it can be to make new friends in a new place. That's why she founded Dinner with Friends, a place where you can meet new people in a relaxed and fun way over a delicious meal. She believes that food is best enjoyed when it's shared and paired with great people and conversation. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you so much for having me.
So for anyone who's not familiar with your program, how did you first come up with Dinner with Friends?
Yeah, so as the bio said, I moved to New York right after undergrad. One thing that I always loved about school was the community that it built. You are just with people who have similar interests to you. Maybe if they're not the same major, you have clubs, extracurriculars, so many different things that you are just there to meet new people and to connect with them over that shared interest. And I realized after you graduate and you don't have school as a medium to meet people anymore, it can be extraordinarily difficult to meet people, even in a city like New York, which you'd think there's so many people here. How hard can it possibly be? Because there's just so many people, you're bound to come across someone who has a similar interest to you. But the fact of the matter is that New York can be a very lonely city despite having so many people here. And I grew up in the restaurant industry. Food has always been something that's been a connector for me personally. And I think that's a very common sentiment. And I had this idea of a dinner party as a way of meeting people. I was curious to know what would happen if I invited random people off the internet to come and all eat dinner together. That was the basic premise of it, is there was no qualifier that you had to have a certain interest, be a certain age, have lived in the city a certain amount of time, nothing like that. It was really that anyone who came with a appetite, both for food, but also conversation and to meet people, was more than welcome to join. And that's the sort of short version behind it. I'm happy to go way more in depth on the whole, what kind of fueled the whole idea, but that's the short story. And it's evolved into something much bigger than the four walls of my apartment, which is where it originally started, was really just a way for me to meet people. But now it's become something much, much bigger, which is really cool. It goes to show that it's not just me who is having trouble meeting people. It's something that we can all hopefully relate to.
I feel like what you're hitting on is so universal. I can speak personally. That was so true to my experience. Once you move out of your college dorm, there's this immediate drop off of finding people who naturally have similar interests to you. I remember when I got one of my first jobs in the city, my manager said to me point blank, New York is one of the loneliest cities. What plans do you have this weekend? And I was like, I don't know. I still have some friends from college, but it's interesting. What I'm hearing from your story is that you're going back to things that feel really natural to you. So you grew up in the restaurant industry. Food has really always been a part of ways that you relate to people. So you immediately went to food. I can share when I was, looking for new friends in the city, it took me a little while to think of it, but ultimately I realized I should probably join a local parish, join a church, and find people with similar values. So I'm curious, what made you, or not what made you choose food, but did it ever enter your mind, I grew up with food, maybe I should try something different? Or was it immediately a aha moment, like I'm going to use food as a way to connect with people?
Yeah, it's a great point. Really, what you're looking for is hopefully something that of interest that you can capitalize on, whether that's just to meet people or to build something bigger from it. Food for me was sort of a natural one, but I will say it felt comforting. But if you've ever known someone who's owned a restaurant, or have owned a restaurant yourself, you'll know that it's an extremely grueling and very, very difficult profession. And so that was the other side of things that I had seen as well growing up, was the fun side, which was being in the restaurant and meeting loads of people and being around delicious food all the time. The other side of things, of course, is that you are there from dawn till dusk. You're there all the time on holidays and so on and so forth. So it was something I had never personally aspired to, was anything related to the restaurant or food industry. My undergrad degree actually is in art history and organizational studies, which is sort of like psychology and sociology. Nothing related to food at all. And then the pandemic hit, and like many people who were finding hobbies or rediscovering hobbies for maybe the first time in their adult life, for me, it was going back to cooking. I suddenly had all this time on my hands when I was in school, and I couldn't do anything besides go to the grocery store. So I would go to the grocery store and I would cook, and I would cook these just insanely elaborate meals for myself and my roommates. And I kind of fell in love with cooking again. And I think that's one thing that I'll be, I guess, grateful for during that time, was being able to fall in love with food and cooking again. So when I moved here, it sort of seemed like a natural progression. And when I was thinking about different things I like to do, when I started working at my job, I kind of fell off having any hobbies. And there came a certain point where,
relatable.
yeah, I know. I think it's very common. There came a certain point where I really missed having hobbies and having something to be super passionate about outside of what I was doing at my day-to-day job. And that's when I came across food as my idea. There's so many other things I think I could have done as well. I really love to do yoga. I also do a lot of art on the side as well, but food was just something that it seemed very natural to connect over, because that's how we gather on a regular basis anyway, is meeting friends for dinner or eating dinner with your roommates or your partner or your family. So it kind of seemed like my new take on that was with strangers who would hopefully become friends.
I love that. Outside looking in, I can see like the dots connecting. Like if you studied to be a curator, but you're also interested in food and also organizational behavior, putting complete strangers together in a room feels like a natural fit. So I love hearing how that all came together. So you mentioned, meeting strangers and hopefully making new friends. I know that you started Dinner with Friends through friends of friends, but have you developed any close friendships with people that you've met who were previously complete strangers to you before a Dinner with Friends evening?
Honestly, quite a few.
Really?
I always say that Dinner with Friends was something that was selfishly motivated. And what I really mean by that is that this was a way for me to meet people in a city that I was now calling home. It became something much bigger somewhat recently, within the past 6 months, where it became a way for other people to meet people, which is the next natural progression in all of this, is to spread the love and make it beyond just me. But I have a funny story. I also host cooking classes as well. So we'll do the Dinner with Friends is the bread and butter, no pun intended, of the whole thing, but I'll also do cooking classes and things like that as well around food. And I had someone at one of my first ones that I ever did who came to one, and she happened to just be a +1 of someone who had previously met. And it turns out this now friend of mine actually lived right around the corner from me. She lived probably not more than 300 feet away from me. And she'd been living there for at least a year, and we had never crossed paths. And I would walk past her place.
That's so New York.
New York.
Continue.
Every time I went to the grocery store, anywhere, I would walk right past her place. And we had never, maybe we had crossed paths, but we never really actually met. So it takes sometimes something as simple as a cooking class or something like dinner with friends to meet the people who live right next to you. So that was just one by proximity alone. That was kind of funny. And she's an amazing friend and a really good friend of mine now. But this is dinner with friends really is just designed to be the meeting place for these kind of interactions to happen. That might be someone who just happens to live a few doors down from you. Could be someone who lives across the entire city, could be somewhere in between. But yeah, I've met people, which has been amazing because that's the reason I started this thing in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I said it before, but that's so New York. You could live next door to someone for 7 years and never speak to them. So what a great way to like break out of that mold. And you're talking about like people could be your neighbors, people could live 2 boroughs away from you. Have you noticed or have you ever put together a dinner with friends evening and thought, wow, this is a very interesting combination of people? And like, how did you feel about that? Or I guess what's like the wildest or most random assortment of guests that you had that you couldn't think of?
Yeah, it's funny because there is no like typical group. If I could say there is maybe a typical demographic, if you will, people who come,
Mhm.
but every group is similar but different. And what I mean by that is there's always a moment where kind of things just click, where we move from kind of this inevitable awkwardness of being strangers that are meeting for the first time over to people who feel very comfortable with each other. For me, it's really interesting because it happens every time, despite who's coming. One of the most interesting groups I had was a group I had at the very beginning of this year, really before things started to take off, when it was still casual, and it still is casual, but when it was much different than it is now. I had someone come who actually happened to be the Airbnb host of my partner's parents. They had stayed with her one of the times they'd visit us in New York, and we had kind of somewhat kept in touch ish. And then she'd stumbled upon dinner with friends and come, not even knowing that it was me who had started it. And so when she came over, she was saying, "You just seem so like familiar." And I was like, "It's because we've met super briefly before, just when we were outside of her apartment." And she is probably older than my parents. And she's with people who are my age, maybe people in our like 20s and 30s. And that group was just so interesting because it was so many people from so many different walks of life. Like I had someone who was an influencer who was there. This particular person who was the Airbnb host, she is a professional soiree thrower. So she throws jazz era, prohibition era soirees that I actually went to one of them. It was a blast.
That's amazing.
Yeah, amazing job objectively that you're a soiree thrower. But that was probably one of my most interesting groups, just because there were people from so many different walks of life, people in the performing arts, in the practical arts, in media now, and so on. But it's always just fun to see how we all kind of have this thing in common, which is that we want to meet new people. And this is just our way of doing it. And with that, of course, people who like food tend to come. So we're always swapping restaurant recommendations and so on.
That's really interesting. Yeah, the more you speak about the kinds of people that you have, like there's a natural inclination to think that no one's going to have anything in common. But the more I hear from you, the more I hear the through lines of people who are interested in hospitality, naturally curious about other people, love food. So that's just what I'm hearing. And it sounds like such a rich conversation starter. And I love this trend that you're noticing of there's always a moment where like the switch kind of flips on the evening. Do you feel like that is a natural thing, or is there something that sometimes you might find that you do to help break the ice or move the conversation along?
Yeah, it's a question I get all the time. It's a little bit different than what you're asking, but related is what are the conversation openers that you have? What do you have in your back pocket to keep conversation moving along? And I don't have anything. I have a little icebreaker I do at the beginning of the evening, and it's literally just to figure out where people are physically seated for the evening. And it's related to travel, and I have these plates with different cities from around the world. So all I say is go sit at a plate with a city that you want to go to or have been to. And then we go around and we say, I sat at London because of this, or I sat at Tokyo because I used to live there, but now I want to go here. And that's a natural conversation starter. I love to travel as well. So it's always fun to kind of hear where people have gone and where they want to go and so on. But I will say, I think that the reason I don't have to have these conversation prompts necessarily is because the type of person who's signing up for an experience like this, at the end of the day, you're eating dinner with a stranger that you've met off the internet, with other strangers who've also come off the internet. It's a bit of a crazy idea. Then there takes a certain personality type who's willing to put themselves out there. The other
Totally.
with this as well is that everyone comes alone. I don't really want people to come in a pair. Everyone comes completely solo. It takes a certain person, again, to be willing to put themselves out there like that. And because of that, I find that I don't really need to do too much because the people who are coming are the people who will move the conversation along. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that sense. You're getting out of the experience what you put into it. So I'm very lucky that I've always had just amazing groups. There's never been anything awkward, weird, never kicked anyone out. Hopefully it won't happen. But I think, again, it's just people who are coming for the right reasons, which sounds very corny, but I think it's true.
I love that. I was just going to ask, is there any sort of like pre-screening questionnaire that you have to make them fill out, or do you pre-screen in any way?
Yeah. And I think, part of it is we have to, right?
Yeah.
And I'll speak for just myself because there's other hosts that I have around New York City, but I think I can sort of speak for all of us as well. Part of the reason we have to screen is that, one, we're hosting it in our homes. At the end of the day, we're taking on a level of risk by inviting people to come into our home. And most of us also host alone. And so we need to feel comfortable with the people that are coming over to our house, much like you would if you were just any other person inviting people over. And so because of that, there's a pretty rigorous kind of screening to even get into a dinner. Part of that as well is that just to manage the volume of interest. We have way more people who want to come, which isn't a great problem to have, than we have seats available, just due to the nature of these gatherings being pretty small. I host 10 people, including myself. That's just about the largest number of people we can host. But we have a screening process just really for safety for ourselves, but also for the safety of the other guests that are coming as well. We just really want to know a little bit about the people that are coming over. So we ask things like logistical, where do you live in the city? And we ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself. And some people write paragraphs on paragraphs. Some people just write like, I have a cat named Pickle and I live with my roommate and things like that. We also ask for social media information and so on and so forth. So we can do a little bit of vetting and screening.
Sounds like the vetting that I do when I was doing online dating, I have to admit. So the fact that you've always had a positive experience, and we could do a whole other podcast on the kind of experiences that a lot of people have had with online dating. So I just really give you credit for picking all the right people. If you've always had, or mostly always had, a good experience, that's just so incredible.
Yeah, I think maybe just a good judge of character could be part of it. I think the bigger reason, though, probably is that people who want to come are good people. You're willing to put yourself out there to try and find a new friend. So yeah, I've had good luck so far. Knock on wood. I'll hope it continues, but so far so good.
So thinking like beyond dinner with friends, has this experiment changed the way that you view friendship or community? Has it taught you anything about the world even outside of dinner with friends?
Yeah, I feel like I could get so philosophical with this one.
Oh, please do.
Yeah. And going back to, what I was saying about having only amazing experiences, I think, again, there's self-selection in this as well. But part of it is that it's just a very human, it's probably the most human thing. I'm combining two of the most human impulses. One, this urge that we have to gather and be around other people, and this urge to eat. They're two kind of things together. But I think beyond that as well, it's the most human thing to want to find community, whatever that might mean to you, whether that's something that's in your immediate family, whether that's in a family that you have personally found. It could be in a parish, it could be at a dinner table, it could be at a yoga studio. At the end of the day, what we're really all looking for is people who love and accept us for exactly who we are. And that's what I'm ultimately trying to build and create with Dinner with Friends, is a safe space. Physically, that's where the vetting comes in, but also metaphorically, where you can be your true authentic self. So I've had people who come over and are using maybe their name that they want to be called for maybe the first time in their entire life, using the pronouns they want to use as well. And that's something that is extremely important to me. And I always feel a little something exciting come up in me when I hear those kind of things happening or see those things happening at my table, because what that signals is that I've done my job as a host well in that immediate experience there at the dinner table. But also more broadly, that means that I've created this community where people feel like they can be their true selves. So I guess that's my little philosophical spiel, is I think people are inherently good. People want to be seen by other people in the way that they want to be, whether that's how they're dressing or how they're showing up in the first place. And that can take place in many different forms. Just for me, it happens to be at a dinner table, but I find that I am always having more and more empathy just as a result of these dinners that I'm hosting, because you really never know what people are going through. And it's something that seems so obvious, but it maybe isn't so easy to actually practice that on a daily basis, that we really never know what people are going through. People could have the biggest smile on their face ever, and they could be going through something really hard. And those kind of moments have come out through dinner with friends. So it's made me reflect a lot about what I am trying to build and also what my part in this is, especially as someone who is not from New York. I moved here. It's really amazing for me to be able to give back in this very special way and create my own community as someone who's moved here. It's really important to me.
I love that you're, reflecting on ways that outside of dinner with friends, this experience has kind of changed the way that you approach other people. Switching gears a little bit from the philosophical to maybe the more practical, and kind of going back to the root problem that you're trying to solve is, cracking the nut on why it's so hard to make friends after college. Why do you think it's so hard, beyond the reasons that we've discussed of like you're in a new environment? But let's say, for example, you're not the kind of person who would naturally sign up for a dinner with friends experience. Maybe that like you're an introvert and that's just not something that you would aspire to do, but you really do want to make friends, after college or just as an adult. From what you've learned with dinner with friends, what would you advise them to do, or what tips could they keep in mind?
Something I try to always tell myself is, if it was easy, I would have already done it. So there's that. If it was easy to put yourself out there, you probably already would have done it. I think part of the reason that it's something like dinner with friends is important, and why we are having trouble meeting people, is I feel a bit curmudgeonly when I say it, but I do think it's true. We do spend a lot of time on our phones and on the internet, and there's a lot of connection and community that does happen online inevitably. I mean, to be honest, part of the reason dinner with friends took off in the first place was because of social media and people talking about it online.
Totally.
So I can't dish on that at all, because it's part of the reason I'm even here today. That being said, it's sometimes the easy way out is easy for a reason. It's because that's the way you should go. Sometimes the easy way is just easy, and it's easy to sit inside and be on your phone. It is hard to put yourself out there, but you would have done, I guess those are the two things I keep in mind. That being said, I think that when you have something that's genuinely interesting to you, whether that's something you're passionate about, doesn't need to be something you're good at, could just be something you're passionate about, other people are attracted to that energy. Let's say you're really interested in reading and you love to read and you talk to other people about reading. I'm sure it's really evident, the people you're talking to, how much you love it, because you're so passionate about it. It's natural for it to come out. And I would just put yourself in a position where you're having those conversations with people who probably also like the same thing that you have. So that might be a bookstore that you just go to. And maybe that's just talking to the people that work there, because if they work at a bookstore, they probably really like books.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you go there once a week for a month. You might see a trend that you're seeing the same people there over and over and over again. And maybe one day you have a little bit of courage and you talk to that person that you're seeing. So I'm talking about it like it's incredibly easy, and it's not. But that's the very practical piece of advice that I do give is, if you love something, I just said bookstore, keep doing it over and over again and put yourself in a position where you're meeting people who might also really be interested in that. And the chances are they probably also are looking for someone that they want to be friends with and talk to. So I think frequency is a big part of why school is such an easy way to meet people. When you're at school, you're there very frequently. You're in the same class, you're seeing the same people every single time. And at some point, usually you have a conversation with someone, it kind of snowballs from there. As an adult, the places that we go most often is work, and you have friends at work, but it is inherently very different than school. So start finding other places that you might find yourself frequenting. And that might be restaurants, bookstores, yoga studios. Those are just a few examples. But if you can find something that you like, again, doesn't mean you need to be good at it. You don't have to be an amazing yoga person to even just enjoy going to a studio. But if you keep going, you'll probably start to find that you're seeing the same people there over and over again. And at some point, you'll inevitably have a conversation. So that's one of my practical tips that I tell people.
I feel like I can relate to your mindset. My mom used to call me just like she's like, you're such a joiner, Mary Kate. Like you love to just like jump in. So I can't relate to like like I'm afraid to go up to people and talk to them, but I do know that they're out there. So I want to make sure that they feel heard in this conversation as well. Something else that I would, I have experience, but also would love to know your advice, or maybe you give this advice or these tips to people at your dinners. Do you have any ideas for like a follow-up strategy? So say someone goes to a dinner with friends and they make an instant connection with someone over traveling to Paris. How do you recommend, like, what's a good like follow-up strategy to make sure it doesn't fizzle out? Because I feel like I know from experience, like I've met someone, had a great conversation at an event, and then it just kind of fizzles. How do you recommend people avoid that?
I see it happen all the time. You're at somewhere, I'll say at my dinner for this example, you're having an amazing conversation, you're there, and I just hear time and time again from people as I'm leaving, and maybe they're just saying it because I'm the host and they want to be nice. Like, I had the best time tonight. Like, I'm going to tell everyone about this. This was just like completely unforgettable. And you feel that in the moment. The second you walk outside, you're on your phone, you're trying to figure out how you're going home. You're already thinking about, what am I going to do tomorrow? What's my work week look like? It's very easy to just, as amazing as something can be, have it completely slip your mind. So I tell people, if you want to do something, make a plan now. Make a plan now. It doesn't need to be that you're going to hang out tomorrow morning. It could be that next Saturday you have a plan that you're going to go to this dinner reservation, or you're going to go do X, Y, and Z. And if you make a plan before you leave, again, I'm saying it like it's super easy, that's probably the best chance you have at actually following through with it. The other thing I'll say on a related note as well is that it's hard to be the first one to do something, to put yourself out there, to approach someone, and that sort of thing. But it's almost like the bystander effect. If we're all just standing around waiting for other people to talk to us, who's going to talk in the first place? And that's where having just that little small amount of courage. It doesn't have to be something you're doing on a regular basis, right? But you can save up a little bit of courage for one day to actually make that little leap. It doesn't always have to be you putting yourself out there, but if you don't ever put yourself out there, makes it a bit hard. And the other thing too, that I often tell myself and think to myself is, would I rather deal with like 10 seconds of embarrassment or have like an amazing experience or amazing friendship? And it's, when you think about it that way, it's sort of an easy choice. To me, it's an easy choice. I can either deal with the 10 seconds of awkwardness, they don't want to hang out. Okay, that's fine. But in the more likely chance that they actually do want to do something, now I've put myself through that, small little challenge. Now I get to do something amazing. So that's something, just some food for thought to think about. Because I wouldn't say I'm naturally the most extroverted person either, to be quite honest. Something that's kind of interesting is that I don't really even know if I would sign up for something like dinner with friends, to be quite honest. I've been doing it for a while. When I first started it, though, I don't think that I would have done it, to be honest. So extroversion is sort of something you can grow into a little bit, I think, but it isn't always just right there, right front and center. So there's a little tidbit as well, is that even though I do this now really often, I'm hosting people all the time, and now probably would be that person to sign up for something like this. It wasn't always that way. But I wish I'd had the courage to do it a little bit earlier.
Interesting. What appealed to you then about, do you see a difference between being the host and being a guest as far as interacting with people? Like, did you see maybe like a divide between you and the folks who were joining? Is that what kind of initially appealed to you?
I think for me, something like public speaking has always come very naturally. I think a lot of people have a lot of different strengths, and I have a lot of weaknesses. Public speaking, though, I will say, has been something that has always come very naturally to me, and it's never been something I've been nervous about or felt like I really have to prepare for. So when I thought about it that way, I was thinking, I've never really been someone who's been nervous about like giving a speech or something like that. It made me contextualize it a little bit differently, as odd as it sounds. Also, part of it was that it was in my home, so it felt kind of like I was more in control. I was in control of the experience, of how long it would last, of how I wanted it to go. I was kind of in charge of who was coming, because I have to give people my address if I want them to come, and so on. So because of that, I had a little bit more autonomy over the situation that I was in. And I think that's kind of what made me a little bit fearful on the flip side about going to something like dinner with friends was that I didn't have that control. I was jumping in headfirst into something that was really unknown. But now I've grown up a little bit. I've grown into it a little bit as well. And everything comes easier with practice. So I've sort of had the practice of putting myself out there to the point where now it comes a little bit more naturally.
And something that you touched on a little bit earlier that I would love to just like revisit is talking about social media. So you acknowledge, obviously word of mouth is essential to your platform. And, we also talked about the downside of being glued to your phone, but do you see the role of social media, or how do you see the role of social media in forming new friendships? Whether it's, you go to a dinner with friends and you make sure you're following everybody on Instagram. Like, how do you see social media playing a role in those new friendships?
I think it is really critical to it as well. Something though about like how I use Instagram is it's a really nice way for me to keep in very casual touch with a lot of people. And what I mean by that is part of getting older as well is the fact that you just don't have as much time on your hands as you used to. You have more responsibilities and so on and so forth. And so it's as much as I would love to keep in touch intimately with every single person from every single phase of my life, it's just also not reasonable or fair to either of us to put that expectation on. And it's kind of nice. I found in some of my friendships that it allows me to see what people are up to. And, I'm someone I'm always chronically like swiping up at people's stories. This looks so cool. Like, I'm so happy. This looks, I'm happy this happened and so on. But I don't think that that's the key necessarily to having a very rich friendship, in a very intimate, rich friendship, if that's what you're looking for.
Right.
I think it serves a specific purpose. To me, at least, I won't speak for everybody, which is to stay connected to a lot of people. Is it the best way to have a lot of very close friendships at once? Maybe for some people that's possible. I would say for the majority, it might be very tricky. For me, it's not feasible, but I think it can be a lovely way to meet people. But it does sometimes get hard to take those friendships from an online space to an offline experience. So you might have connected really well online, whether that's in something like a group chat or something like that. But when it comes to meeting up in person, it's sort of almost awkward, or it feels uncomfortable because you don't actually really know each other. That interaction that happened online feels a little bit removed from what's happening in real life. So I don't know if I'm the best person to comment on it, to be honest, but it is interesting to see how it plays a role in my own personal life and also with dinner with friends as well. Because as much as dinner with friends is an offline experience, the reality is that most people are finding it on social media, online. And, so I can't discount it at all because that's given me what I have now with dinner with friends.
I love the way that you summarize that. And I think it's really interesting the way that you look at it as complementary, and it doesn't have to be one or the other, and the purposes that it serves. So I love that. One of the last few questions I have is, where can folks learn more about Dinner with Friends? And is there anything else that you're working on right now that you want to share about, or, tease a little bit on the podcast? Feel free.
Yeah. So it's just Dinner with Friends NYC on Instagram, on TikTok as well now. And I'm Anita. You can find me there. I won't promo myself at all in that sense, but we're actually taking the month of September off. Part of the reason why is the summer was super busy for us. We had so many dinners happening. Personally, I hosted a lot of like sponsored brand dinners, did loads of different interviews. We even went on TV, which was crazy, but super cool. So we're taking September off just to rest, I guess. I don't think it needs really more of an explanation beyond that. Also to kind of think about what is happening next for Dinner with Friends. Part of the thing that happens when you have something that started very small is that it almost becomes difficult to scale because it was never really intended to. When you have a startup, your whole thing is scalability. When you have something that's about human connection and meaningful friendship and doing so in a small way, it's very difficult to scale up. So we're taking this month to kind of think about how we can be extremely true to our mission and values, which are meeting people in a very chill, fun way over food, but also bring this a little bit bigger and bring it to more people. So taking this month to kind of do I guess, strategic refresh, I would say. It sounds very clinical when I put it that way, though.
Well, would you say it's giving you a sense of, I don't know, ennui about the whole thing?
I think I would say that if you didn't take the words right out of my mouth. But we have some exciting stuff coming up in October. One thing I've wanted to do for a long time is a larger scale event, just to see, can this feeling that happens at these dinners of friendship and connection and kind of intimacy of being around other people happen on a larger scale, because they do run kind of counterintuitive to each other. So how would that happen? Can it happen? So thinking, if we do something with 40 people, how can we maintain that intimacy that comes with a small group? We have a few fun ideas that will be cooking up, hopefully, in October, but also just thinking about how Dinner with Friends can continue to grow, but stay very, very true to the reason that I started in the first place, which is meaningful connection and very intentional friendship.
Can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Well, then, I mean, I alluded to it before, but our final question that we usually ask our guests is about ennui. So we're talking about this sense of feeling stuck, bit of malaise. Is there anything, maybe beyond reimagining your platform for Dinner with Friends, but is there anything really that's giving you that sense of ennui or the blahs these days that you want to just get off your chest?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the exact reason I say we. When I say we, it's just me and these other hosts that I have, of course. But I think that's the exact reason I'm taking September off. Is the point of Dinner with Friends is to the friendship thing, of course, but it's also meant to be very fun. And I've been working at this for a long time. The past 6 months really have been very, very intense. I work a full-time job in financial services on top of doing all of this as well, plus maintaining my own friendships, so on and so forth, and trying to just keep my head screwed on straight. So I have been feeling exactly what you just said. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to think about why I started this in the first place, and what I wanted to achieve with it, and how I can stay really true to that. And I think I want to just mix it up a little bit, which is why this larger scale event is something a little bit new. I'm kind of curious to see how it's going to go. Also have some really exciting conversations happening right now with different partners and brands and sponsorships too. That's a whole different feel that I had never even encountered before I started doing this. So right. I am trying to lean into the things that still feel very new. It all still is new, but there are some things that are feeling a little bit route right now. So I'm trying to lean into the things that feel very fresh and very new. So that would be the larger scale events and working with these different partnerships that I'm trying to build as well, to kind of get me out of this humdrum of the everyday admin work that's going on. So if I had to give very practical advice, I would say do something today. That could be something extremely small. That might be just like making what I did the first day I started Dinner with Friends. I just literally went on Instagram and made Dinner with Friends NYC. There was no content, nothing on it, but I had a username. It gave me something to sort of strive for. I wanted to take a few pictures to have them on there. And that's what I did the first day that I started this. And this one happened to go somewhere, which is kind of cool. But I've had loads of other things that have gone absolutely nowhere. But it does take that first little step. And it's very easy to say that you'll do it tomorrow. But you could also take a little tiny step today. And that could be literally just spending 30 seconds to make an Instagram account. It is incredibly way too easy, to be honest, which is why there's probably so many bots on the site. But if you can do something really small, that will get your foot moving in the right direction to hopefully take you somewhere really exciting.
Well, Anita, your enthusiasm is just downright infectious. And it's been great to have you in this conversation. This podcast is a new venture for our team as well. So I love that you are just so open to leaning into the new. And that's probably going to be something I take away from the conversation. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again for listening to You, Me, and Ennui. As always, I hope the conversation today offered a bit of insight into whatever you're facing. And know that there are at least one or two more people here in podcast land who can relate, because that's what we're trying to do, build a community. Looking for some deeper reflection on today's conversation? Be sure to listen to our bonus meditation after this for a few questions on how this topic might apply to your life. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to like, review, and subscribe. You can also join the conversation at our Discord server, linked in the show notes. I'm your host, Mary Kate Polanin, and the one thing that's for certain is that I'll be with you next time on You, Me, and Ennui.